Southern California wasn't supposed to break. Not here. Not in San Diego, the city that always found a buyer, even when the rest of the map went cold. But then the for sale signs started multiplying, and the numbers stopped obeying the headlines. Homes that sold in days sat for weeks. Agents started whispering about price cuts like secrets you only tell at the end of a showing. At first, everyone called it seasonal. Then the charts said otherwise. Inventory was surging, prices were bending, and the governor's phone was lighting up like an emergency alert. Behind the sunshine, something had shifted, a quiet unraveling that nobody could spin away. Because when the most expensive zip codes in Southern California start discounting, you don't ask if there's a problem. You ask how far it spreads. It didn't start with panic. It started with silence. Open houses that once felt like festivals turned awkward, the echo of empty footsteps replacing the buzz of bidding wars. In North Park, sellers trimmed 10 grand, then 20, like shaving off bad memories. Down in Chula Vista, price cuts stacked like dominoes, one drop pulling the next. Oceanside agents who once bragged about offers in 24 hours started avoiding eye contact when buyers asked, "So, how long's it been listed?" But the shift wasn't just numbers on a chart. It was the tone. The nervous laugh after, "We're still getting traffic." The hesitation before hitting list at last year's price. Behind the smiles, everyone knew the rhythm had changed. Homes sat. Calls slowed. And for the first time in years, sellers were chasing buyers instead of the other way around. Still, the market hadn't crashed. It was just exhaling, quietly, painfully, before the real story began. For most Californians, the mortgage used to be the monster. Now it's just one head of a three-headed beast. Homeowners across San Diego opened renewal letters that hit harder than any interest rate hike. Insurance premiums doubled or vanished entirely when carriers pulled out of wildfire zones. HOA boards scrambled to rebuild reserves after years of deferrals, tacking on emergency assessments that landed like surprise car payments. Then came property tax reassessments, adding another sting to the monthly bleed. A family in Mira Mesa saw their insurance jump from $2,400 to $6,800 in a year. Retirees in La Mesa found their HOA dues tripled overnight after mandatory reserve rules kicked in. Each envelope brought a new number and a new reason to ask, is this still worth it? Owning a home in paradise now meant paying to defend it, against fire, against floods, against math. And for thousands of owners, the budget broke long before the market did. For years, Southern California's mantra was simple: stretch now, it'll pay later. But later finally showed up with a bill. Mortgage rates hovering near 7% turned monthly payments into small fortunes. A $700,000 home that once felt reachable at 3% suddenly demanded over $1,500 more every month. For young buyers, that gap wasn't a hurdle, it was a locked door. Wages haven't caught up. Teachers, nurses, and tech workers who once dreamed of buying near the coast now find themselves driving 2 hours inland just to find listings they can afford. Couples who pre-qualified last spring are ghosting their lenders this fall. Renters, once desperate to own, are watching from the sidelines as price drops still don't make sense. Even those who bought at the top are realizing the math doesn't forgive, especially when every renewal brings another jump in insurance or taxes. Affordability didn't fade, it fell off a cliff. And below it, the echo is getting louder. When the investors leave, the market loses its confidence. For years, San Diego was their playground, a city where flippers could flip, landlords could lease, and short-term rentals printed money faster than tax forms could keep up. But the math stopped working. Airbnb calendars went half-empty, weekend bookings turned into midweek vacancies, and profit margins that once looked bulletproof suddenly began to bleed. Institutional buyers who once snapped up entire neighborhoods quietly backed out of contracts. Cash offers disappeared from open houses, leaving nervous sellers staring at the one financed offer that actually came through, with conditions attached. In Pacific Beach and Oceanside, properties once listed as turnkey investments now read motivated seller. Downtown condo towers that glowed at night with investor cash are showing dark windows again. Every market runs on faith. the belief that the next buyer will pay more than the last. But when the pros start running the other direction, everyone notices. Flippers shelved renovation plans. Out-of-state buyers ghosted their agents. Even local investors, once addicted to leverage, began dumping units just to clear debt. With each exit, the safety net vanished a little more, leaving regular homeowners exposed to gravity they hadn't felt in years. The easy money that once propped up San Diego's boom was gone. And what replaced it wasn't panic, it was silence, heavier and more honest than anyone wanted to admit. For most of the past decade, finding a home in San Diego felt like a scavenger hunt, too few listings, too many bidders, and nothing staying on the market long enough to blink. Then, almost overnight, the roles reversed. Sellers began outnumbering buyers, and listings multiplied like wildfire. The coming soon banners that once sparked bidding wars started to collect dust. In neighborhoods from North Park to Chula Vista, inventory jumped more than 30% in a matter of months. Each new sign in the lawn undercut the last. A seller dropped $15,000, another followed with $25,000, and soon price cuts weren't headlines, they were habits. Builders joined the race too, rolling out aggressive incentives, rate buydowns, closing cost credits, and even furniture packages to move unsold units. It was the fastest shift anyone could remember, a market sprinting downhill with no brakes. Agents whispered about stale listings, a phrase that hadn't existed here for years. Homes that sat for 60 days suddenly faced the scarlet label of, "Why hasn't it sold?" Sellers who refused to adjust learned the hard way that buyers had options again. Lots of them. And behind it all, confidence slipped. Every week brought more active listings, fewer pending sales, and an unspoken truth spreading through group chats and real estate offices alike. This wasn't a cooling-off period. It was a correction in motion, and no one could say where the bottom was. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind of night when numbers usually stay quiet. But that week, nothing stayed quiet. By 9 p.m., the governor's conference room lights still burned through the windows of the Capitol. The charts on the wall weren't just red, they were bleeding. San Diego's price index had posted its steepest monthly drop in over a decade. Mortgage delinquencies ticked up. Construction starts froze. Counties from Riverside to Orange were already warning of shrinking tax revenue. Inside the room, tension hummed like static. Advisors spoke in fragments: inventory spike, insurance exposure, migration trend reversal. The governor, usually composed, rubbed his temples and stared at the screen where San Diego's housing graph looked more like a cliff. "How did this happen so fast?" he muttered, not expecting an answer. Someone blamed insurance costs, another pointed to high rates, and someone else whispered the word no one wanted to hear: confidence. Emergency options flashed across the table: mortgage relief funds, insurance subsidies, temporary rate freezes. None were simple, all were expensive. Behind the closed doors, the talk shifted from stabilize to contain. They knew what came next: headlines, hearings, heat. By midnight, a decision was made: form a rapid response task force, issue a statement by morning, and pray the weekend calmed the storm. But as the clock struck 12, one thing was clear. San Diego wasn't just a housing story anymore. It was a political crisis, and the governor was running out of time to stay ahead of it. San Diego was only the beginning. The tremors rolled outward, reshaping every corner of Southern California. In Chula Vista, new subdivisions that once sold out in a weekend now offered closing credits, landscaping packages, even prepaid HOA dues to lure buyers. Streets that used to echo with the sound of construction now sat quiet, half-finished lots waiting for confidence to return. Up the coast in Oceanside and Carlsbad, short-term rentals turned from golden investments into money pits. Once booked calendars showed blank weekends. Owners slashed nightly rates, but it wasn't enough to cover ballooning insurance costs. Some gave up entirely, putting their income properties on the market at six-figure losses. Inland, Escondido and El Cajon became cautionary tales for first-time buyers who stretched too far. Commute costs soared, insurance climbed, and appreciation, the promise that made it all worthwhile, vanished. Families who moved east to escape coastal prices now faced the same math in slower-moving markets. Farther north, Temecula and Murrieta saw builders in full retreat. Incentives piled up, from mortgage buydowns to backyard upgrades, but foot traffic dried up. Riverside and San Bernardino counties felt the aftershock next. Growing inventory, rising days on market, and sellers who'd rather rent than take a loss. Even Orange County's safer pockets, Anaheim, Santa Ana, Mission Viejo, couldn't outrun the chill. Buyers were reading HOA budgets line by line, calculating whether the California dream still made sense. The map told the story. From coastal condos to inland cul-de-sacs, the slide was statewide, and no one could call it temporary anymore. When the numbers turned ugly, the response came fast, at least on paper. Sacramento announced the Housing Stability Task Force, a sleek name for a scramble. Press conferences promised relief, headlines praised swift action. But behind the optimism, reality dragged its feet. The state floated ideas: temporary property tax caps, insurance credits for fire-zone homeowners, and fast-tracked permits for affordable builds, but none of it touched the problems sitting on kitchen tables. People simply couldn't afford to stay. In San Diego, city leaders tried their own rescue playbook. They pushed zoning adjustments, density bonuses, and rent control expansions, hoping to ease the squeeze. But builders, wary of dropping prices and tighter credit, hit pause. The once booming pipeline of condos and townhomes thinned to a trickle. The help felt distant, more like paperwork than policy. Banks tried to join in, offering teaser rate buydowns and limited refinancing windows for underwater homeowners. For some, it bought time. For most, it just delayed the inevitable listing. Even the insurance crisis drew its own patchwork: emergency coverage pools, rate hearings, and subsidy debates, none of which stopped premiums from climbing again 6 months later. By fall, it was clear that government couldn't outpace a market already in motion. Relief came in fragments, late and uneven. And while Sacramento spoke of stabilization, open houses told the truth: sellers still cutting, buyers still cautious, and confidence still nowhere to be found. Behind every percentage point was someone packing a box. In Claremont, the Torres family finally gave up the fight. Their insurance renewal topped $7,000, and after years of rising costs, they decided to sell before the next hike. "It's not the house," they said. "It's the math." A few miles away in City Heights, Maya, a first-time buyer, watched her dream slip away when closing costs ballooned by $12,000 in the final week. "I qualified last spring," she sighed. "Now the same house is impossible." Small landlords felt it too. In University Heights, Kevin owned 2 duplexes. When repair costs jumped and short-term rental profits collapsed, he realized his passive income wasn't passive anymore. He sold one property just to cover the other's losses. "I didn't lose the building," he said quietly. "I lost sleep." Across San Diego County, the stories blended together: retirees trading ocean views for affordability inland, young couples delaying families to save for down payments, tenants stunned by rent hikes from landlords trying to stay afloat. Every spreadsheet on the governor's desk hid these moments in its margins. Because numbers don't capture exhaustion. They don't show the look on someone's face when their home, their symbol of stability, becomes the thing they can't hold onto. The crash wasn't a headline anymore. It was personal, and it had a name in every neighborhood. By winter, the panic had cooled into something colder: acceptance. The market that once glowed with unstoppable growth now hummed with hesitation. Prices had fallen enough to tempt buyers, but not enough to erase fear. Every price-reduced sign carried a question: was this the bottom, or just another ledge? The governor's task force released its final report, full of cautious optimism and promises of measured recovery. But out in San Diego, the story felt different. Streets once crowded with open houses stood quiet. Builders waited for demand that never showed. Families who left for cheaper states sent texts back home: "We miss the ocean, not the bills." And yet, hope has a stubborn way of hanging around here. Interest rates might fall. Jobs might rise. Maybe insurance reforms will stick this time. Maybe next year's numbers will turn green again. But the truth everyone feels, even if they don't say it out loud, is simple: the California dream costs more than it used to. The only question left is whether people will still pay the price. Because markets recover. But confidence? That takes longer.